The Geneva International Convention Center throbbed with a charged pulse of global influence gathered beneath one roof. Delegates from 150 nations moved through marble corridors, their polished shoes echoing against walls steeped in decades of diplomatic memory. Outside, autumn rain drummed steadily against a glass facade, while inside, the air hummed with restrained anticipation. Camera crews adjusted their lenses with clinical precision, capturing fleeting glimpses of world leaders speaking in guarded tones. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with sharp cologne as translators made final adjustments to their headsets. This was the crucible where careers were forged and reputations dismantled. With a single phrase, Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat within the African Union section, his military fatigues a stark contrast to the tailored suits around him. Calloused hands rested on the polished desk, while his sharp eyes scanned the chamber like commanders surveying a battlefield. The young Burkinabe leader had traveled over 4,000 miles to challenge the world's silence on Western interference in African affairs. Behind him, advisors murmured softly in Morin French, their voices nearly lost in the rising hum of conversation. At just 35, he was the youngest head of state present. Yet his presence demanded a deference that experience alone could not command. This day would either amplify his voice on the world stage or bury it in silence forever. 3 rows ahead, Judge Edward Chen adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and reviewed his notes with meticulous care. The American jurist had built his career on razor-sharp legal reasoning and an unyielding devotion to international law. His black robe appeared almost ceremonial in this political arena, but everyone present understood the authority it represented. Chen's parents had fled persecution in Taiwan, instilling in him a rare understanding of sovereignty and accountability. He had specifically requested to respond to any remarks on judicial independence, a topic that carried both personal and professional gravity. His pen moved with measured precision, crafting phrases capable of reshaping global diplomacy. The moderator's gavel struck twice, releasing a metallic note that seemed to suspend time. Hundreds of voices fell silent as delegates settled into leather chairs, the soft rustle of paper forming a quiet overture of expectation. Cameras pivoted toward the podium where the placard read Captain Ibrahim Traoré, President of Burkina Faso. In 4 languages, the young president rose deliberately, his boots striking the floor with purpose. Behind the glass barrier, journalists leaned forward in unison, aware that history was about to unfold. The confrontation that awaited neither man had foreseen, but both would remember forever. Edward Chen's path to this moment began in a cramped Oakland apartment, where his immigrant parents worked double shifts to fund his education. His father, once a respected judge in Taiwan, had fled political persecution, carrying nothing but law texts and unbroken ideals. As a boy, Edward translated legal documents at the kitchen table, while his mother prepared traditional meals. By 12, he could recite constitutional amendments in both English and Mandarin, his intellect sharpened by hardship. He grew into a man guided by integrity above ambition. Harvard law recognized his brilliance, but it was his moral courage that set him apart. He graduated summa cum laude while working nights at a legal aid clinic defending immigrants who mirrored his family's story. His professors marveled at his ability to unearth forgotten precedents and craft remedies for impossible cases. Though elite firms courted him, he chose public service. His first landmark case, challenging a federal deportation policy, cemented his reputation as a defender of the marginalized. At 32, he became the youngest federal judge appointed in a decade, earning rare bipartisan approval. Chen treated the courtroom as sacred ground, a place where logic and ethics merged into justice. His rulings, exhaustive and precise, dismantled monopolies and held governments accountable. International recognition followed, and his appointment as a judicial advisor to the UN Human Rights Council crowned 2 decades of disciplined service. Yet this session would test whether American legal rigor could withstand the raw current of African sovereignty. From Washington to The Hague, Chen's name had come to symbolize moral clarity in an age of compromise. Meanwhile, the weight of 21 million Burkinabe citizens pressed upon Ibrahim Traoré's shoulders. His nation had endured generations of exploitation, its gold enriching foreign banks, while its children walked miles for clean water. The coup that brought him to power was more than a political upheaval. It was a declaration of dignity from a generation tired of foreign control. In his pocket lay letters from farmers whose lands had been sold to foreign corporations, ink-stained testaments to betrayal and hope. His uniform bore no medals, only the insignia of service. Today's speech could either legitimize his government or let Western media paint him as another African strongman. The numbers told the truth. Burkina Faso produced enough cotton to clothe half of Europe, yet most Burkinabe could not afford fabric from their own fields. French companies extracted $2 billion in gold yearly, paying less than $50 million in taxes. Contracts signed by previous regimes had surrendered mineral rights for generations. Night after night, Traoré studied those agreements, his anger cooling into strategic resolve. Every line of his address was crafted to shatter the myth that African poverty was natural instead of engineered. Western capitals had already begun to tighten pressure after his calls for fairer resource terms. The French ambassador had warned of dire consequences if Burkina Faso persisted in its pursuit of economic sovereignty. Now, as the microphones flickered to life and the world held its breath, two men, born oceans apart, shaped by struggle and principle, prepared to test the limits of power, justice, and truth. The World Bank suddenly reported irregularities in development projects that had long functioned smoothly under previous administrations. Within weeks, American military aid was quietly suspended, leaving Burkinabe forces vulnerable to terrorist incursions along the northern frontier. European media began publishing stories of human rights violations and democratic regression just days after Traoré's government revoked several exploitive mining concessions. The young president understood what was happening. This speech, delivered before the world at the Geneva Convention Center, was his only chance to tell Africa's truth before being dismissed as another strongman. Standing beneath the bright lights, Captain Ibrahim Traoré carried not only the burden of Burkina Faso, but an entire continent weary of lectures on democracy from the very powers that had engineered its poverty. His advisors had urged caution, to stay diplomatic, to avoid provocation that could invite sanctions or isolation. Yet the folded letters in his pocket from dispossessed farmers reminded him why diplomacy had failed Africa for 60 years. His prepared remarks contained hard evidence of corporate exploitation, documented interference in African politics, and a demand for resource sovereignty bold enough to challenge the foundations of international law itself. He knew powerful forces would rally against any African nation that dared to seek true independence. His mission was simple: speak truth to power, no matter the cost. When the moderator announced his name, a hush rippled through the chamber, like stones striking still water. European delegates shifted uneasily, their casual composure replaced by focused apprehension. Judge Edward Chen looked up from his notes, his pen frozen mid-sentence. The French delegation bent toward one another in urgent whispers, their voices drowned by the hum of air conditioning and recording equipment. Television cameras zoomed in, catching the calm, unflinching face of a man who had traveled thousands of miles to deliver an inconvenient truth. The air in the room thickened. Traoré adjusted the microphone with the precision of a soldier. For 10 long seconds, an eternity in diplomatic time, silence reigned. His small delegation sat rigid behind him, their expressions betraying both pride and anxiety. In the press gallery, journalists leaned forward, pens poised, sensing that this might not be another ceremonial appeal for development assistance. Finally, Traoré began. Honorable delegates, distinguished guests. His French accent cut crisply through the hall, startling those who had expected a translator. Judge Chen's attention sharpened. Even the moderators exchanged glances. The president of Burkina Faso had requested only 15 minutes, an unusually short window for a head of state. But his tone made it clear, brevity would not mean restraint. European representatives shifted in their seats as Traoré's voice carried flawlessly through the chamber, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Even the translators hesitated, sensing the weight of what was to come. For 60 years, he said, we have been told that Africa must obey international law, protect foreign investments, and adopt democratic values defined by others. The words hit like a drumbeat. The translators caught up, but the English-speaking delegates already understood the challenge embedded within his calm delivery. Judge Chen's pen remained still, He recognized immediately the perilous legal ground being tested. "But I ask you today," Traoré continued, his voice gaining force, "whose international law defends African children when foreign corporations poison our rivers for profit?" Folders snapped open across the hall as delegates scrambled for prepared talking points that suddenly felt inadequate. The Swiss moderator shifted uncomfortably, uncertain whether to intervene. Then Traoré reached into his jacket and withdrew a single folded document. The contract he had studied for hours on a flight from Ouagadougou. "This agreement," he said evenly, "signed by my predecessor with the French mining giant Arva, grants them rights to our uranium for 99 years, in exchange for 5% of its market value." The chamber erupted in a wave of gasps and furious note-taking. French delegate Marie Dubois froze, her composure cracking as panic flickered across her features. Judge Chen raised an eyebrow, recognizing the seismic legal implications. Traoré was effectively renouncing the legitimacy of entire systems of global resource extraction. "Therefore," Traoré declared, his voice steady and resonant, "I announce before this assembly that Burkina Faso will no longer honor any contract signed without the consent of its people, no matter the government, no matter the court." The words hung in the air like a live wire. Every delegate in the room understood the consequences those sentences carried. Lawyers whispered to one another, calculating the geopolitical fallout. American officials reached for encrypted lines to Washington. A CNN correspondent typed rapidly, "Traoré declares economic independence. Massive backlash expected." At the podium, the Burkinabe president stood motionless, his jaw set, the posture of a man who had just burned every bridge behind him. Then, in a slow, deliberate motion, Judge Edward Chen rose from his seat. The soft rustle of his black, judicial robes seemed to still the air itself. The Swiss moderator hesitated, gavel suspended midair, as the American juror stepped toward the response podium with surgical precision. Every camera turned. Every breath in the chamber seemed to pause. Across the diplomatic hall, two men, one soldier, one judge, stood on the brink of rewriting the boundaries between law and power, between justice and empire.